Board of Directors meeting, WTA Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, May 21st, 2026. Vicki, can you start with the roll, please?
Yes, Buchanan.
Here.
Cotton is absent. Hawkinson.
Here.
Forsyth. Here. I believe we're going with Blacklock is absent unless she's with us online. Lilyquist.
Here.
Is Maryland online? Absent at the moment. Reinstra.
Here.
Stewart is here. And Darwin. If you're online. Thank you.
Present. Okay, item C, public comment. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes on any topic relevant to WTA. Let's start online. Is there anyone online who would like to unmute and address your board? Do so now. Seeing none, is there anyone in person who would like to address the board? All right, that was tough. Okay, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to do item D4 first, consideration of Whatcom Land Trust acquisition. Class.
Yes, so this is the third installment of our programmatic approach to our carbon sequestration, trying to offset locally our carbon footprint. So what we have today, Alex, Whatcom Land Trust is here. We have Susan and Michael from the Million Trees project online. And so this is to update on the third installment that we're recommending that we contribute the budgeted $150,000 towards the acquisition. As you know, it offsets our carbon footprint. The acquisition of this property would offset one hybrid bus per year. Could offset other things too, but just for ease of understanding, offsets one hybrid bus, which the total land acquisition then in partnership with Land Trust and Million Trees project would be 5.5 buses, hybrid buses a year offset. And those offsets, the great thing about this partnership is those offsets are done locally as opposed to buying carbon offsets that could be international. So we get the local benefit, particularly since the carbon is here. So with that, I'll ask Alex if you wouldn't mind reviewing the property. With the board. Thank you.
Yeah, where is the best place for me to stand or sit?
To here.
Yeah, right there. Okay.
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, good. Well, good to see everybody. Yeah, my name is Alex Jeffers. I'm the conservation director with Whatcom Land Trust. I've met a few of you. Good to see you. Others, good to meet you. So as Les mentioned, this is the third year that we have partnered on an acquisition project that, as Les was describing, you know, we're looking at the carbon offset benefits, which is definitely a priority for WTA. But we've also been looking at what are the ways that these projects can help support our community in other ways too, right? What are the co-benefits that we could bring to our community all throughout Whatcom County, in addition to the carbon benefits, which I think is really the big plus of doing a project locally rather than purchasing carbon credits
for WTA. And one of the things I really appreciate about you, Alex, and Susan, Mike, we can't see, but how we leverage this money to go even farther to have better impacts. And I appreciate that approach.
Yeah, so as a quick little recap before we get to the property that we have on the screen today, the first two projects that we did, one was 2 years ago, and that was in the Ferndale area adjacent to Lake Terrell. And that was a property that had a mixture of already established mature forest that we were able to protect, but also a field that we're in the process of getting started on doing some replanting and reforestation there, right? So it's in that mix of protecting existing carbon and, you know, producing new carbon sinks on the property. That one was also a really important wildlife corridor for Whatcom Land Trust that was adjacent to the Lake Terrell area managed by Department of Fish and Wildlife, but also existing Whatcom Land Trust property. And as I said, located in the Ferndale area. We moved north and east up to the Everson area last year, where we were able to work on a property where the previous landowners had not only protected a stream corridor, but had planted thousands of trees on that property. And the family was looking to figure out what was next for that property after their parents had passed away. being able to protect all of that work that they had done, protect all of that sort of incoming carbon sequestration was really valuable. But we were also then able to protect, there's a really valuable salmon bearing tributary to the Sumas River. And we were able to work with a local school to have that become an environmental classroom that they were able to work into. So really, again, looking at those co-benefits. So today, the property we're looking at this year, we're working on continuing spreading out those benefits around Whatcom County and looking at not just concentrating them in one area. This one is out off of Mosquito Lake Road, near just east of Acme. It's 20 acres of wetland, riparian, and forested habitat. So this one really has the sort of dual benefits of protecting carbon in the mature forest stand. That's about half the property, about 10 acres. And the other about half the property is wetlands, which also play a really critical role in sequestering and storing carbon as well. One of the big co-benefits associated with this property is that it's in these wetlands are in the headwaters of Hutchinson Creek, which some of you may know is a really important tributary to the South Fork. It provides, it's the second largest contributor of cold water to the South Fork in the late summer months. And that's a really important, when salmon are coming back up the South Fork does not get glacier melt in Mount Baker like the North and the Middle Fork do. It's totally reliant on snow melt from the Twin Sisters, which were only in May. And if you've looked up at the Twin Sisters recently, snow is already starting to show its temporary nature up there. And so being able to protect these wetlands that are storing that water on site to slowly release into the late summer is really, really important for salmon populations in the South Fork. So that's really one of the big co-benefits associated with this property beyond the carbon associated with the mature forest and the carbon associated with the wetlands. It also expands, and we have an adjacent 109-acre property that the Land Trust has protected about 30 years ago out there. So it's building off of that corridor, And as Les was mentioning, in terms of leveraging resources, one of the things that we've really been able to do with the help that WTA has provided towards these projects is use that as match funding to support grant applications that we're getting elsewhere. So this one, the property is $450,000. So the $150,000 that WTA provided helped to leverage another $300,000 of funds elsewhere to bring these project benefits to the community. I don't know who is the controller of the screen, but if we wanted to move to the next slide, I've got sort of a zoomed in map. Yep, there we go. Great. So there you can see it's two parcels, a few 10-acre parcels each, located right there. The sort of gray color is Department of Natural Resources. So this is also building off of forested land that is owned by Department of Natural Resources, and the yellow color is that existing Whatcom Land Trust property that it shares that corner with. And then if you go one more slide, I've got a couple photographs of the property as well. So there you can see the wetland, and you can see some of the forested portion of the property as well. In terms of specific carbon benefit, Les was able to give a little bit of information there. Michael and Susan are on the call as well, that they could answer some questions about the carbon report that was produced for this property. And I'm happy to answer any other questions as well.
Thanks to them for generating the report. Really true project.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm something about the sequestration report, that there's the annual and total numbers given. It's the annual sequestration is equal to the equivalent to the annual emissions of the bus. Correct. Gotcha.
That's correct.
Thanks.
If anyone online has questions or comments, just speak. We can't see
We
you.
pull the slide down.
Yeah. I don't have any further slides.
Rochelle, if you could pull the slide down, that'd be great. As usually, your steps ahead.
There appears to be a house on one of the properties, so. we're not
Yeah.
buying the house, obviously.
Well, so the house is on the property. It's in it's not in very good shape. And it's located right next to the wetland. So the house is on the property, but we're not planning on retaining it.
So you're tearing it down.
Sorry, yes, yeah, we will be demoing the structures that are on the property. Like I said, they're right next to the wetland. It's all, this is all, none of it's connected to the grid. It's all sort of off grid, area out there, and yeah, the house is in somewhat disrepair.
The other piece that I would just like to mention about this property is that it's a connective piece. So not only is it sequestering carbon, but it's commanding the wildlife corridor, and it's just a really strategically placed property. So it was an excellent acquisition for Alex to identify, and it's a really lovely one for you to help purchase.
Thank you. Any other questions? A motion?
Just do it. I'll move we buy the bronze property for carbon sequestration. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have one more question. Over time, so someone needs to mute.
Mary, yeah.
Over time, does the carbon, trees grow and grow, but they grow slower over time. Is there a time when it doesn't do as much as it does today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, so there's sort of like a curve of how they're putting on biomass and retaining carbon. And so, one nice thing about this property, and actually all the properties that we work on together, it does have a mix of opportunity for protecting existing forest, and then also there's some, at least small bits of clear area we can plant, and we can have that mix of new trees that are coming up and planting carbon. It's typically, they'll continue to put carbon on through their whole existence, but it slows usually around sort of 80 to 100 years that sort of it starts to level out a little bit. But they do continue putting carbon on, and they continue storing it as well.
I guess, is there any benefit ever to log it off, store the carbon in homes, and then have new come?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that folks look at is what are the opportunities for maximizing carbon sequestration. You can do things like forest thinning or gap cuts, where you sort of have that, continued mix of younger trees and older trees. And that's something that is definitely a possibility. That's something that Whatcom Land Trust is doing with other properties. And so it's something that, some properties that we own, we are able to do.
So there is the opportunity to do that in the future if someone chooses to do so.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, all those in favor of this land acquisition, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah,
Thank you.
and I don't know if my contact information is included, but my email is just alex@whatcomlandtrust.org. If other questions pop up later, don't hesitate to ask. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, item D1, consideration of minutes right-of-way property to City of Ferndale. Cindy and Mark.
So I think we have a slide coming up there. So this ask is for permission for our general manager to sign documents related to City of Ferndale right-of-way acquisition. And they're along Main Street. The City of Ferndale is going to do a Main Street major improvement of roadways, sidewalks, utilities project right in front of our Ferndale station. And they need that it's a tenant required by little less than 300-foot long section of WTA current property. They need to acquire that as part of the project. And I would like to thank Kate Ratter here. She's joining us here today. She's the City of Ferndale Public Works Project Manager for the construction project. And so
She's the queen of Ferndale.
Yeah, she's the project manager, I think, for all construction projects for the city. And so if there's any questions specific to the project, Katie is. willing to answer some of those. And Mark Lee, city representative, legal counsel. So Katie's team and Mark worked closely, worked to make sure the documents were satisfactory to WTA and the city of Ferndale. And there's quite a few documents related to this project. There's a temporary construction easement, temporary construction permit, permanent utility easement, and that is for maintenance and improvements to the wetland waterway that is in the Gully and is partially on WTA property and the Gully on the northwest side of the property. And basically, it's all part of the Barrett Lake wetland that goes underneath Main Street, the Barrett Lake, and then in flooding, it goes, back and forth between WTA property and Barrett Lake. So that's really important that be maintained, for proper flood control and that sort of thing. So let me see, are there any questions about that?
I'll move approval of the conveyance of property to Ferndale.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Questions? Anyone online?
Does that include signing all the other
Yeah,
documents?
all the other ones, yes.
All.
Whatever she said, she did.
All those in favor, whatever. All right, all those in favor of the right of way property to city of Ferndale, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the hard work you guys into pulling all this together.
Thank you.
Right.
E2, consideration of agreement with Whatcom Community College. Andra.
So, later on this summer, our final extension of the contract with Whatcom Community College expires. And we would like to propose a 5-year contract with them with 4 1-year extensions. Going back just a little bit, this agreement started in 2017, where the Orca Pass became their bus pass. Whatcom Community College handles all of the encoding. They separate out youth for us so that we know youth ride free. They run a positive list update, so every 24 hours, those lists update to whether someone's a student or not. It's just students, not faculty. And then in 2022, after COVID, we switched to a per tap model that was 50 cents. But seeing as we're having a fare increase September 1st to $1, we have offered 75 cents. And that discount takes into account 2 things. One, that they basically run their own program, their own classes. They do all of the back-end IT work for us, give us the reporting numbers that we need, and those taps are not fare capped like they would be for the general public. Any questions?
Questions?
I move approval of agreement for student bus program for Whatcom Community College.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the agreement with Whatcom Community College, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you so much. E3, consideration of approval for annual traffic maintenance. Tiffany.
Wow, good morning.
I like your dress.
So this is our annual agreement with Trapeze. It's our core transit planning and booking operator assignment software, and we purchase every year. So it's just after agree to annual. Is there any questions?
Questions?
I'll move approval of the Trapeze annual maintenance contract. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the trapeze maintenance contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you.
To get way easier. Item E, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Item F1, reports of the board legislative session summary. I don't know why that was hard to say.
Word.
And I'll just introduce Hannah Jones real quick. I thought about all the wonderful things I could say about Hannah, but every one of them will become apparent as soon as she starts speaking about all the work that was done last year. So I will just say that she's been at this for 10 years and has just really wonderful relationships with everyone in Olympia. And yeah, we're just really fortunate to have someone who truly feels and acts like an extension of staff. So I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Maureen. It's good to be with you all. Good morning. Excited to talk to you all a little bit today about the legislative session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. All right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, awesome. So for those I haven't met yet, I'm Hannah Jones. I am WTA's contract lobbyist. That means that during the legislative session, I represent you all in Olympia. And then our contract typically runs from October to around this time. So I help you all prepare for the legislative session as well and getting your legislative priorities ready to go and connecting with your legislators ahead of session. I'm going to start my presentation today by giving a broad overview of the 2026 legislative session. There was a lot that was packed into very short session. And then I'm going to talk about the outcome of WTA's priorities, how you all fared in the budget, a couple of additional legislative issues that we had our eyes on this session, and then we'll talk about next steps and where we go from here. As I mentioned, the 2026 session was short. It was only 60 days, which is quite quick compared to the 105-day session we had in 2025 and will have next year in 27. It was the second year in the biennium, and that means that legislators spent their time debating and passing policy and adopting supplemental capital, operating, and transportation budgets. All bills that were introduced during the 2025 legislative session that died were automatically reintroduced in 2026. And in addition to that, legislators introduced a slew of new policy proposals. Supplemental budgets, when they're developed, they're significantly smaller than the biennial budgets that are developed in the odd year. They really are intended to make small adjustments, such as addressing emergencies, fixing any mistakes, or funding small projects. So that's what we expected to see from the legislature this year. Democrats held wide margins in both chambers of the legislature as well as the governor's office, and as a result, they set the agenda. They set the tone for what would be worked on this session. Couple of those topics, just to name a few, big topics of conversation were tax reform, responding to the Trump administration, and affordability. I'm gonna go to my, and just a note here, you'll see it, we had around 1,200 new bills introduced this last legislative session, but only 268 passed into law. So the legislative process really worked its magic in terms of funneling out policies that weren't quite ready for prime time. This is a fun visual representation about the size of each budget, which I think is helpful to understand, especially as there's so much conversation going on in the media about, the size of the operating budget. It really is quite large. And we saw this last session a $2.3 billion increase. That was the size of the supplemental operating budget for a total of $80.2 billion in the budget that ends June 30th of 2027. Transportation budget, we also saw a $1.2 billion increase, about a 7% increase to the total size of the budget. And then for the capital budget, we saw about a 10% increase to that budget. As you may recall from my presentation last year, in 2025, the legislature adopted a slew of new taxes and fees to increase the overall revenue that is deposited into the operating budget. However, since the budget was signed last year, spending has continued to outpace revenue. And as a result, when the legislature came into session in January of this year, they faced another nearly $1 billion shortfall in the supplemental operating budget. In December, we saw a proposal from the governor that proposed more cuts to state agencies, withdrew funds from the budget stabilization account to cover the shortfall. And also, there was a proposal on the table for a millionaire's tax to further address that gap, although we won't see revenue from the millionaire's tax until I believe 2029. So what all to say that, a lot of this session was really focused on how do we address that revenue gap and at the same time fixing what the Democrats message as the regressive tax system that we have, which is largely based on sales tax. Ultimately, the legislature did a number of things this session to basically figure out how to address that shortfall. They adopted a millionaire's tax. Again, we won't see revenue for a few years on that, but they also withdrew funds from the budget stabilization account and backfilled that account with dollars from the Left One pension plans. As a short aside, because it is relevant for this conversation, the legislature, you may have seen in the news that Washington's Moody credit rating that determines the rate at which the legislature is able to borrow in order to fund capital projects shifted from stable to negative. And that is because of some of these different mechanisms. The budget is really relying on a lot of one-time moves, right? Moving funds here, backfilling here, right? And if you look through the budget, you can see a lot of those types of those shifts, and it's drawn some criticism just in the last week or so. And so I would offer that is going to be something that we're watching. The credit rating hasn't changed technically yet, but it could. It's certainly a shot across the bow for the legislature to pay attention to to the way that we are addressing the budget and some of these shortfalls. All that to say, the legislature is projected to face yet another $880 million shortfall in the 2027-29 operating budget. And we're already hearing from budget leaders that number is probably going to be worse. And in just to make matters more interesting, that shortfall, we have budgets in the future based on this millionaire's tax. If the tax gets challenged by the court, which it almost certainly will, if that gets thrown out by the court, then that gap gets significantly worse. And so here we are paying attention to elections for a couple of reasons. One is that we have a number of Supreme Court seats up. Those folks who will be deciding what happens with the millionaire's tax, certainly very relevant to be paying attention to this year. The other component is that we have a number of legislative retirements that are occurring before next session, including some institutional budget wisdom. Representative Tim Ormsby from Spokane, who is the chair of the House Appropriations Committee and in charge of the operating budget, is retiring. The chair of the House Capital Budget also retiring. So we were in for some new dynamics next session for sure. Just really quickly, I'll talk about the transportation budget as it relates to you all. Essentially, there was a lot of conversation about bonding against the 6-cent tax increase that was adopted during the 2025 legislative session. We're similar to the operating budget, we're continuing to see revenue decline due to lower fuel consumption, and there is kind of growing pressure to invest in maintenance and preservation of our existing transportation infrastructure. Ultimately, the legislature decided to do some bonding, but not max out full bonding capacity. We are anticipating that in 2020, in the 27-29 biennial budget, there are going to be some cost overruns. And that was the thinking of the transportation budget chairs in developing the budget that, let's not max out our bonding capacity yet. We may need it in the future to address some of these project shortfalls. Okay, so just to highlight your outcomes, WTA did really well. I'll note that you all received funding in the capital budget in the 2025 legislative session, consistent with how I advise folks during the biennium. Typically, if you get funds in one budget during one legislative session, you may not get funds in the next. So we took that into account, or WTA took that into account in developing your legislative agenda. We really focused on protecting what we have. And all of WTA's reappropriations remained in place and according to the schedule, which is really an awesome victory, particularly as we talk about, a lot of these shifts with the budget. And then the Regional Mobility Grant Program was fully restored for the next biennium, but with, a caution here that some of these grant programs may not be as set in stone, may not be codified. And so I would encourage, as we're thinking about the next legislative agenda, to really think about continuing to advocate for fully funding and protecting these grant programs going forward. Just a very quick overview here. These are a few of the bills that we tracked this session. One was House Bill 1923 regarding mosquito fleets and allowing transit agencies as well as other municipalities to establish passenger-only ferry districts. Ultimately, that bill died, really ran out of time, and also the House and Senate could not agree on the final version of that bill. Happy to get into that more in depth if folks have questions. And then another which allows House Bill 2588 allows Whatcom County to construct, purchase, and operate and maintain passenger-only or auto ferries, and that goes into effect here next month. Another bill that was proposed was regarding expanding the Youth Ride Free to include technical and community colleges. Those bills ended up dying, but it was funded as a pilot project in Kitsap and King counties. And then finally, there was a bill about the public transportation benefit area board composition, adding a labor representative as a voting member, and that bill did die in the Senate Rules Committee. Next steps here, and I apologize, I know I'm over time. I highly recommend, your legislators are incredible to work with. They are gracious. They always make time when Les and Maureen come down to Olympia, and Jen as well. They always are, they are easy to work with. They're always thinking about you all. They're always happy to step into the hallway and talk about any bills that impact WTA. So strongly recommend engaging them and thanking them. Preparing for the 27 to 29 legislative biennium, my suggestion is early engagement with legislators. Think about what your priorities look like, and ideally we want to kind of run those ideas by your legislators as we get ready for next session before just to get their feedback and get their support. And then finally, you all are going to have a new legislator come January. Senator Sharon Shoemake is retiring, and so the 42nd Legislative District Senate seat is open, and so we'll have a new person to work with, and excited to build that relationship come November once that person is in place. And with that, I'll wrap up here and happy to take any questions.
Questions? Is there anyone online? You? Being none? Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thorough job, Hannah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Here's one thing I'll just say, which is how the partnership works with Representative Timmons. He had a bill unrelated to transportation, but a bill about convenience stores selling these things for kids to get high. And kudos to our transportation security or safety officers and expediters and others out there. We're tracking how many we saw on our buses and garbage cans on our thing, and fed that information to Representative Timmons. So it's a nice partnership that when Hannah says they're thinking of WTA, they reached out and said, hey, could you help get some facts on how big of a pervasive problem this is? So kudos to WTA staff for helping on that one.
Great. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Up to the annual performance report. Becky.
Here to talk about
how our service did in 2025. The next slide. So fixed route, we had a very slight decrease. It was about, let's see. So there were about 50,000 fewer boardings last year. So just flat, we had some service changes where we changed the route a little bit, so that may have disaffected some existing riders before new riders can come for the change. We also had a program up at Western, which was show and go, which was relying on the operators to count passengers. So that might have also contributed to a slight decrease for the fixed route. But we're holding steady there. Next one. So this just shows from 2017 our fixed route boarding. So we see the dip for COVID. We're back up to about 83% of 2019, and we hope to over the next year they will increase a little more. Next slide. So our paratransit ADA service had a 9% increase in boardings from 2024, and that's about 3.1 boardings per hour. So that's relatively stable for the boardings per hour. What has increased for paratransit is the miles that the passengers are traveling. We increased service up in the Blaine Birch Bay area. Next slide. And you can see we're about 90% of the 2019 levels for paratransit. So that's also kind of recovering at this a steady rate. Next slide. This is our zone service. It was also flat. There was no change from the previous year. That's kind of the theme for a lot of the services. We're just holding steady this year. Next slide. And our zone service has decreased over time, the number of riders, possibly as we increase service out in the county and the rural areas, and other economic factors, but it's a small number of boardings, so we're at 62% of 2019. Next slide. And our ride share, we saw a 7% increase in boardings for ride share, and that's 37 passenger miles per boarding. So that's how far people are going per trip.
Yeah.
Next slide. And we're also recovered to 95% of the 2019 numbers. So that's nice, as our main pool is, rideshare is a very efficient mode for people to travel. Okay, next slide. Malcolm is going to talk about our updated evaluation guidelines that you see in the report and how we're monitoring the service.
Yep. So as you guys may remember, this year we updated our evaluation guidelines with a number of new metrics, as well as making some adjustments to some of our longer term metrics. I'll actually go from bottom to top here, but the first thing that I think is important to note is on page 17 and 18, we have our normal spreadsheet that essentially shows a wide range of metrics from boardings per hour to on-time performance. And these are highlighted in three key colors. We have red, which is essentially below our thresholds. We set these thresholds for each of our routes based on route typology, so whether they're a local urban route or a regional route like the ADX. We also have essentially yellow, which is between the threshold and our target. The route's doing well enough, but it's not doing great. And then finally, we have green, which is showing that the routes are above that target. And you'll see that across our routes, we have a huge spread in cost per boarding, as well as cost per passenger miles. Some of our routes will be doing better on cost per boarding. Those local urban routes often do better on cost per boarding. And then our more rural routes will do better on cost per passenger mile as passengers are traveling farther, but there's fewer of them. The next thing that I really wanted to note was we've added a new endpoint on-time performance. So before, the way we looked at on-time performance in this evaluation was essentially just looking at on-time performance at time points throughout our entire route and an average of those. And now we've added this endpoint on-time performance. So when the bus is getting to the station itself, and what you'll note in our table is that pretty much across the board, our routes are doing better at their endpoint on-time performance than they are in the in-route on-time performance. And so this basically is showing that our buses are struggling throughout the route. Maybe they have points where they're behind schedule. Oftentimes, this is even more apparent in our route that have longer detours. Those are highlighted. And then the buses are essentially clawing back that time and being on time. Almost all of them are in the green by the time they get to the station. And then the final thing that I want to highlight is our access to opportunity. This is a new metric for this year. And essentially what we're looking at is the access to 3 key destinations. So grocery stores, medical services, and social services. And we're looking at that in 25-minute increments. So how many people can get to a grocery store within 25 minutes using our service? And then again, 45 minutes, how many people can get to a grocery store or medical services within 45 minutes? And this year, we don't have a target or a threshold set. This is essentially setting our baseline for the future. So you'll note there isn't any target shown there, but this is essentially allowing us to get a baseline of what we'll be looking for in the future as we change service. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have about those metrics.
And Malcolm, do you want to mention that the threshold will then determine, we try not to exceed those particular thresholds based on this particular year. So that's what's going to set the threshold.
Mm-hmm. And that metric will also be updated along with the census, as that makes a major impact on those outcomes essentially.
Questions? That's page 16.
Just got an observation, on the zero vehicle households. It seems to me there's kind of a feedback loop here in the sense that if I had no car, I might like to live near transit. They're coming to reach us as much as we're trying to reach them. But the feedback loop is the better, more reliable our transportation, more frequent it is, the more people actually have that magnet and drawn to us. So I see the greatest natural momentum possible in that for those households, as opposed to lower income households who may be forced to live where they can afford to live, and that we would have to go to them potentially.
Yeah. Any other questions or discussion? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item G, other business.
What's the next meeting, June 4th, is workshop. Pardon me, I'm growing so fast. But that'll be 8 to 12, just as a reminder.
Encourage people to come in person if possible, please. Any other business? Announcements? Very adjourned. Thanks, everyone.